The clip I'm about to show you is very concerning and really just baffling. Mike Winger says that he does not know whether a Christian can lose their salvation or not. And this is huge. I mean, this isn't some trivial issue like whether churches should have coffee in the lobby or not. This is an issue regarding salvation. So this is incredibly important. For those of you that don't know Mike Winger, he is a Christian apologist on YouTube. He has well over 200,000 subscribers. He's considered by many to be one of the best apologists on YouTube and really one of the brightest minds in this area. And he has pastored a church for a number of years. So all this makes it amazing that he would not know where he stands on this topic, given the importance and weight of this issue. So let's go ahead and take a look.
Were they saved? Did they lose their salvation? Like, what's the story with these soils? This is something that I think about, and I think others think about, and I don't have the perfect answer for you. I'm just going to give you a few thoughts as you're trying to work through this. The first soil, were they saved? No. They clearly rejected the gospel itself, the word. They rejected it. They're clearly not saved. The second soil is... In Mark, you read about it, and it doesn't seem like it's pushing that they were saved. They heard it, they received it with joy, but we're not sure if that means that they were saved or if they just received it with joy. Luke says it a little bit different. In Luke chapter 8, verse 12, it says that those beside the road are those who've heard, then the devil comes and takes away the word from their heart. I'm backing up. I'm talking about the first soil. But look at what it says. So that they will not believe and be saved. So in Luke, when the seed's taken away from the first soil, it's so that they will not what? Believe and be saved. This implies that the belief is related to salvation. Then in verse 13, the next verse, it says this about the second soil. Those on the rocky soil are those who, when they hear the word, or when they hear, receive the word with joy, and these have no firm root, they believe for a while, and in a time of temptation fall away. That's interesting. Is it saying they lost their salvation? I don't know. And I'm not sure if that's the point of what's going on in the parable, is to even answer this question for us. They certainly appeared to be saved and then fell away. I think we can all agree there. And we all know people like this who appeared to be saved and then now they're not walking with Christ. And you're like, okay, we can all affirm they appeared to be saved. But were they really, really saved? I don't know, but there's the information from Luke. That's kind of the pivotal passage that I think people would bring up, is Luke seems to imply that belief brings salvation, and he says they believe for a while. So what's going on here? And I personally am not 100% sure. The third soil, they may well just be unfruitful and actually saved. And, 1 Corinthians talks about our fruit will be tested, and yet even if the fruit is burned up, the works are burned up, yet he is saved. The person's still saved. This is 1 Corinthians. So this may actually be talking about a Christian who's just not bearing fruit in their life, which... may be the case. It doesn't seem clear, though, either. So I'm kind of leaning towards thinking that this parable isn't really meant to weigh in on the issue of can people lose their salvation, personally. The fourth, are they saved? Well, yes, obviously. It's like, obviously. So first and fourth, obviously not saved, obviously saved. Second and third are a little bit tricky, in my opinion. And my conclusion personally is, I don't know.
Listen, I love Mike's work, but this makes absolutely zero sense that somebody this high caliber wouldn't know about an issue regarding salvation like this. Unfortunately, he's not the only one, though. I've noticed this to be sort of a trend. Greg Laurie, for example, who's the pastor of Harvest Christian Fellowship with well over 15,000 members, says something very similar. Go ahead and take a look.
Can a Christian lose their salvation? Once you are saved, can you become unsaved? Well, that's not an easy question to answer, but I'll take a shot at it. So are you ready? You might want to write this down. Can a Christian lose their salvation? My answer, I don't know. It seems doubtful. But here's my question in follow-up. Why would you want to push the envelope?
Now see, if you just noticed the laughter after he said, I don't know. Everybody's laughing like it's a joke. But guys, these are souls that we're talking about. This is an issue about salvation. This is incredibly important. Lastly, We have Frank Turek, who is a very influential apologist, very bright mind as well, written several books. He's the president of crossexamine.org. He says something very similar. He says, I don't know. Now, he does weigh in and say, I think I believe in eternal security, but then he goes on to say, but I don't really know. Watch this.
Has anyone ever cited Hebrews chapter 6 about thinking you can lose salvation?
Yeah, that's an awfully disputed passage among Christians.
Yeah, should I read it so everyone can know what it says?
I don't know the right answer to that because Christians disagree over it, and I got friends that think both ways, and let me just say, I'm for my friends. I will say this, though. I think Jesus teaches that once you're saved, you're always saved. Why? Because in John chapter 5, he says, he who believes has passed from death into life. You get eternal life when you believe. You don't get it when you die. You get it when you believe. And if it's eternal, by definition, you can't lose it. So it might be in Hebrews 6 that Paul, or not Paul, whoever's writing Hebrews, could be Paul, whoever's writing Hebrews is essentially saying that you can't go back to those elementary teachings. Once you're a Christian, you ought to be going for solid food, not just milk. You've got to go move on and become a disciple. Don't go back to those elementary teachings. You've already got that under your belt. Move on and become a disciple. I think that's what it means, but I could be wrong.
Mike, how could you not know? In 2 Corinthians 6:1, it says that you can receive God's grace in vain. Did you know that? Did you know that you can receive God's grace, but then receive it in vain? In 2 Peter 2, verses 20 through 22, it says that if you go back into your sin after Jesus frees you, then you are worse off than if you never knew Jesus to begin with. In John 15, Jesus says that if you don't abide or remain in him, that you're cut off, wither, and then are burned. And according to verse 2, these branches are branches that were attached to Jesus. They were in him. Numerous verses like Romans 11 and other verses warn us that we can be cut off for being unfruitful and disobedient. Galatians says that we can be severed from Christ. Now, how can you be severed from something yet never be a part of it to begin with? This makes no sense. In Matthew 18, Jesus tells us a parable of how a guy was forgiven, but then he had all of his forgiveness revoked because he refused to forgive a fellow servant. Jesus tells us in numerous parables like Luke 12 that states that the servants of the king will be cut to pieces for acting inappropriately and not staying dressed and ready for action. The servants are clearly Christians. In Revelation 22, it says that God can take away your share in the tree of life and in the holy city. In Exodus, it says that God can blot out your name out of his book. In Ezekiel 18, it says when a righteous person turns from his righteousness and does wicked things, he will surely die. And let alone the fact that this doctrine wasn't even around until the 1500s, with the exception of maybe Augustine and some of the Gnostics back then. There's warning after warning after warning directed to Christians, telling them not to fall away. And this isn't even all the verses. This is barely scratching the surface. There are many, many more. So, Mike, how is it that you don't know such an important issue related to salvation? You know, we're not talking about what type of cracker to use for communion. This is a very, very important issue. And listen, I'm not going to speculate saying that there was some nefarious reasoning behind this. But if it's fear of losing subscribers or maybe being ostracized or something like that, then it's time to die to yourself, to pick up your cross and to follow Jesus no matter what the cost. But if it's just due to simply not studying it enough, then it's time to dig deep. It's time to really dig in and study to show yourself approved. Like I said, this is an important issue. And I would tend to believe that this is probably the case, considering how bad 1 Corinthians 3, that passage was misrepresented. Let's go ahead and just take a look back at this.
The third soil, they may well just be unfruitful and actually saved. And, 1 Corinthians talks about our fruit will be tested, and yet, even if the fruit is burned up, the works are burned up, yet he is saved. The person's still saved. This is 1 Corinthians. So this may actually be talking about a Christian who's just not bearing fruit in their life.
This is not in any way talking about sin here. I actually did a video on this. I'm going to put a link to that below explaining this passage, but this is not talking about Paul's sin here. If you just look at the context and you look around it right before it and after it, it's talking about Paul is building up a temple of God, which is built with stones, which are Christians. And he's saying that if his disciples make it through the judgment, then he'll receive a reward. But if not, he'll still be saved, but just not his work or his disciples. For him to miss this and misrepresent this passage is very concerning. Mike, if you're listening, please study this through. Please dig deep into this. And I think if you study this, I think that you're going to come to the truth on this. And I think that you're going to realize that this is the same lie that the devil told from the beginning. One of the first lies that was told to Eve in the garden was that surely you won't die if you sin. And this is still being propagated today with eternal security. And even the apostles had to deal with this with the Gnostics back in their day that held to the same belief. That's all I got for today. God bless.